Alright, so starting off the stream, I wanted to mention to people who had tried to join the Discord on previous episodes uh, that I've updated the Discord link. I think that there was a problem where it was a link that expired, and now it's set up so that it won't expire. So if you tried that before and it didn't work, try it again now. Um, Also, we have a new feature for this week where we're going to play this little art animation from Vic over the beginning of the stream. So that's pretty cool. Um I guess now these will just be made as part of the art process for the normal drawings, I think. Um let's see here. Um, yeah. Um, so, um, oh, yeah, it goes super fast so you can't see drawing the same line 30 times. You can still kind of see it, but it's just, all very quick succession. I like that later on in this one, we get to see, like the little sample image that you used for the hand or whatever. Or maybe we already saw that, but um, it was just funny. Do, do, do. Greg says Victoria is trying desperately to conceal that she's actually a speedster, and she's doing this last minute. Wow, funny thing about that, not the speedster part, but Vic says I did draw this one at the speed of light. Um, Finished these 15 minutes ago. Yeah, it was very recent that they were completed, and yeah. But we can just incorporate that into the beginning of the episodes now, and I think that's pretty cool to be able to see that. I haven't even looked at the second one yet, because I just got it. Hey, you missed the little thingy, but that's okay. Um, uh, so starting into it, 3.3. Oh, and we're doing 3.3 and 3.4. And I forgot to mention it, but the audience participation this week for people who want to think back on it is basically, do you think that it was a good plan that they have cooked up in 3.3, or do you not think that it's a good plan? um, let's see here. Vic is gonna post it. So yeah, the thing is that Vic now is posting the like speed drawing that was saved in the computer file when she drew the images. So should be pretty cool. Um, 3.3 is a new benchmark in the series. In the long series of benchmarks of longest chapter so far. Um, I feel like they're over their heads for some reason. They're in over their heads for some reason. Ah, yes, probably. But we will discuss that at the end of the end of the thing. I kind of wanted to format it now, where I re-ask last week's thing at the top of the episode, give people time to mull it over, and then talk about it at the end of the episode. Then present a new question. And this week I didn't have one done because much like Victoria, I was like down to the minute working on the outline. So, um, yeah, that's how it be. Um, let's see here. So this chapter will be almost all about convincing Brian and by proxy Taylor, uh, on the plan, for robbing the bank, and then after that robbing the bank, or not robbing the bank, but coming up with the actual plan itself for robbing the bank, and discussing which people that they would probably fight on the enemy team, which would be the wards. But I think this chapter does a great job of making the setting feel like an actual place that people live. All the little details they mention about the security and the thought processes that go into the measures against them, when they talk about the different characters with powers in the wards, when they talk about little aspects of the world. I think it's a really good chapter for that. It also does really great exposition dialogue throughout, and I think the Undersiders get a chance to shine here. Not Rachel so much, but I mean, part of Rachel's character is not talking as much, so. Right at the start of the chapter, Brian immediately goes against the idea of the bank robbery, which will give Taylor cover for how much she doesn't want to rob the bank. Rachel walks into the scene as Lisa starts talking to the group. Despite everyone calling her Rachel aloud, Taylor will continue to think of her as bitch for the foreseeable future. I had actually forgotten how far it goes. But it's a long ways away until she warms up and starts thinking of her as Rachel. M says, "This one has so many people and powers that I don't think we've met yet, right?" Yeah, that's right. And I'll go over some of that stuff because I know a lot of people have a hard time keeping track of that kind of early information as far as when you meet a whole bunch of characters in this or in a couple arcs when you see there's like a villain bar and you see a scene there and you meet like just a whole pile of characters. But yes, I'll briefly go over all their deals. Em says, "Thank God." Yeah, I was reeling. Yeah, we'll cover all that. And then yeah, so I think this is a good example of Lisa's sense of humor coming through in the dialogue when she says, it's a rite of passage for dastardly criminals like us." I think she's looking for reactions like eye rolls from the others. They mention her smiling a lot in the chapter, but I think it comes through in the dialogue as well. Brian expounds upon the low value of robbing a bank. He has Lisa provide the average takeaway for the bank robbery. Strong play and good use of resources to have her provide the number, since he doesn't have to worry about her circling back to counter or doubt a number he says after the fact. My description of this conversation is probably going to sound like combative and calculated, but these two are actually the kind of characters and people who would like do that to maneuver. They're pretty much like Taylor. Vic says about Tattletale, "This bitch always smiling." M says, "I like Lisa." I also like Lisa. She's one of my top 3 characters, I think. Vic says, "I like the little moments in this, like when Taylor says, 'I thought Lisa would say something, but then she didn't.'" Yeah, it's just not a moment I would think to write myself. Yeah, it's interesting. She's really focused on who's doing what and like how they're maneuvering the conversation. Like she's kind of looking at it the same way that I'm gonna be talking about it, I think. In terms of she can tell that Brian and Lisa are like actively trying to win a conversation. um, let's see here. So, so the dialogue is dense throughout this and has nice little details like Brian being practical, factoring in costs, and Brockton Bay banks keeping less money on hand because there's such a high chance of like a super powered attack on a bank in this specific city. And unfortunately for Brian, all of this only helps Lisa's argument later when she tells them the actual pay structure for the job because she kind of turns it around. Alec gets interested even with the amounts of money Brian was saying are low. Rachel seems more defiantly interested in it after Brian mentions the danger of getting into a fight with the heroes and mentions she says they won battles before Taylor had been on the team. Brian's countering all their arguments as they're being presented, but it's pretty clear that the other two aren't phased. He's talking about how like um, it's still bad risk reward for the money, and they only win fights because they pick their battles. Brian's cautious, and it's like for good reason because he only wants to get into a fight that he already knows he's gonna win. So, let's see here. Vic says Alec wasting his 3K on NFTs. I bet. Yeah, probably somehow he would find a way to lose it all. That's why I think that they need someone responsible like Lisa. That's right, I said responsible like Lisa to keep hold of their money. Um, so Lisa lets Brian go on, probably wanting to hear all his arguments so she can incorporate all of them into hers. After Brian elaborates on past points, Alex says that he wants to do it for the rep, and that gets Rachel to respond again. They're both super far into the pro-robbery camp with Lisa. She probably has an idea before she started the conversation of who would be on board, etc. But now that she's actually gauged the room, all of her effort will be to convince Brian and Taylor specifically. Vic is laughing in all caps and all emojis at the idea of a responsible like Lisa. I think Brian's right in saying that not fucking up for our reputation is not fucking up is better for our reputation in the long run. But on the other hand, if you don't fuck up and you rob the bank, I think Alec might have a point. But this is when Alec brings Taylor into the conversation, and she tries to back Brian up, which allows her to express her own feelings without feeling like she's being suspicious. Lisa starts to go on her spiel, and all eyes are on her. She says this is a repeat of their argument from before their casino heist, and says, "The boss wants us to do a job at a very specific time. I got the sense that he was willing to offer a fair bit if we went the extra mile, and I negotiated a pretty good deal." She was the one who picked the job, and the boss gave her the info on that the protectorate would be busy at the time. So she didn't just pick any bank. She picked the biggest bank in Brockton Bay, which Taylor cuts her off to mention. And Ovik says, great quote coming up here from Taylor. "If I ever wanted to drop the supervillain ruse and become a hero in good standing." Yeah, I didn't pull that out. You're right. And Vic says, "If Taylor?" Yeah, if. Ish. Not very confident indeed, Vic. So Lisa gives an explanation about the bank's location and the protectorate being out of town. They'll most likely only have to fight the wards due to Cape politics, jurisdiction, and stuff like that. And just like in real life, jurisdiction is basically just the legal side of the same coin as like gang turf. So Lisa makes sure everyone's on the same page and they all nod. So they all understand the basics of like the Cape politics and like where different heroes kind of can and can't go without getting in each other's way and getting on each other's nerves, etc. Let's see here. M says, "I refuse to believe that she's going to be a hero at any time. She's in too damn deep." And then Vic says, "Taylor's the hero of my heart." Lisa goes on to say there won't be a full team of wards there because if they sent everyone each time the wards have to go fight, then they'd start to get noticed. And, when I think about it, this doesn't really make sense to me because, if Aegis specifically, for example, was only in fights when, like, a certain student was out of the school, then it would still be really obvious that it's, like, that specific person, right? Maybe there's some explanation I'm not thinking of, but, yeah. it doesn't matter that much because when I first read the story, I was definitely going with the flow and didn't like think about it or question that. It was just upon reflection, so I don't think it bothers me writing wise. Vic says this their school has got to be huge. It probably is. It's probably got like Timberline and a half size numbers, something like that. Um, let's see here. Um, my brain's so broken I can only put stuff in terms of like a school that I've seen. um, let's see here. Where were we? So, Lisa lays out a scenario where they're fighting a small portion of the ward's team that they can definitely beat, and then that lets Brian talk just long enough for him to agree. Then Lisa cuts him off again, and right before whatever he was going to say, and she drops the payout that she negotiated. The boss is offering to pay them double their take from the robbery, with no upper limit. The minimum payout if they don't get away with very much money is to bring them up to $25,000. Any and all totals are split evenly 5 ways between the Undersiders. Brian's already shocked. That's insane. Why would he do that? When Lisa adds that he's covering all their costs, equipment, and info, and even bribes. Brian doesn't understand the motivation, and Taylor's head is spinning over the amounts of money being thrown around in the conversation. Let's see here. So, Vic says, I would just totally notice if Civi Vista was hanging around with Civi Clock Blocker or whatever. I wonder if they all have to ignore each other at school. I think they must. I think it's a bigger deal for like the fact that Victoria is like a publicly known person and she sometimes was around them not in costume, and it's like, isn't that really obvious, Victoria? um oh, a listener question. Well, Vic, whatever your listener question idea is, please write it down now so you don't remember, or so you don't forget. Oh, 2 plus 4 times 5 is here. um have they robbed the bank yet? No, no, they're still talking about it. Let's see here. Yeah, yeah, they just talked about the pay structure that Lisa negotiated them with the boss. Um, to get double whatever they actually bring out of the bank paid to them again. Um, and I mean, she throws out some numbers like she thinks that they can get 30,000 from the bank and then get paid 60,000 from the boss and then have 90,000 to split 5 ways, which is like uh wow, my math skills. So it's less than 20 but more than 15. Math is hard. I think it's like 1,000. No, no, no. Wait. 19,500, something like that. Whatever. Math is hard. Greg knows math. He can tell us if he wants to. 90,000. Um, what was I saying? Lisa throws out an idea that compels her audience that I feel like she must know isn't true about how the boss wants them to have more rep, then slips in that he really wants to do a job at a specific time. Taylor's panicking. Uh, 2 plus 4 times 5 says, sure, doesn't sound incorrect. Um, Taylor's panicking because of all the ways this can go wrong. Brian and Lisa have a bit more back and forth, and Lisa says that Bay Central is the hub of cash the distribution for the county, which has a regular and scheduled inflow and outflow of cash moved in armored cars. When Alec asks about robbing an armored car, then Lisa explains why they shouldn't. Sort of more world building here with like the idea that they'd have ride along capes within the vehicle or aerial cover, and the time that they're supposed to pull a job is like important here in terms of like uh needing to distract people basically. So I think she knows that even if he's not focused on that side of things. Um, and it just so happens that the like morning of Thursday timing for when they're supposed to rob the bank is when they would have the most expected cash on hand. Uh, oh, Greg says 90 divided by 5 is 18,000, but the exact amount isn't super important. It's just a decent chunk of change. That's, yep, yep. After everything, Brian finally says he's in, and then Lisa makes the rounds looking at each person, I think intentionally saving Taylor for last. She looks to Alec. Fuck yeah, I'm in. Rachel nods once. Taylor asks, what would I be doing? Vic says, being a cape isn't all action and kicking bad guy ass. It's a lot of, hovering above an armored car like every day. Yeah, like that's why being in the protectorate and the wards is like loser duty because you have to like stand up for the status quo, which is just like capitalism. Uh yeah. Let's see here. Ba, 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 ba. So, Taylor says she was hoping to, or she thinks that she was hoping to stall or find holes in the plan, but they're good enough at this that she ends up just going with the flow until they're so far in that she can justify that she has to join in planning to minimize the damage. It's, it's kind of like, you can take this moment and extrapolate this onto her cape career. Vic says, Taylor could never. That's why she'll never be a hero. Lisa makes the plan with Brian's assistance. Taylor offers suggestions that she thinks will smooth things out. Taylor thinks about how she would feel worse if a civilian got hurt than she would about going to jail. And then, we get on this nice art here, as you can see in the art for all our people who aren't just listening. Um, Lisa draws a map of the bank and then proceeds to fill in the tons of details from seeing a single photo of the bank manager's desk. Well, it's like the bank manager standing in front of his desk, and she knows like where in the building it is, where all the tellers are, where like the different security doors are, and it's just like, oh, yeah, her power's a really, really good power. Um, they decide not to do anything fancy with like the fuse box or the vents or anything like that. Taylor thinks, besides, this was a robbery, not a heist. And I've heard this line shown as like she's young, like they're teens and they're in over their head and they don't know what they're doing. But it's almost the opposite of that. It's like they understand that like two crimes should not be committed the same way. Like you actually need to approach them differently. Um, because crime is complicated. Um, let's see here. 2 plus 4 times 5 says, well, what they say, a successful crime is better than a failure. Right, Taylor? Vic says, that line is so funny because a heist is cool and less murdery. A heist is cool and less murdery, and this is a good team for that. But I think that, like, a heist is almost the opposite of what Lisa wants them to do because she wants it to be a thing, like a big flashy crime at that time window. Um, so heist is bad actually. Let's see here. Alec makes them lunch because he doesn't really care about adding to the plans here. He needs to know what they're generally doing, but he never knows how he'll act in a situation until he gets there. Later in the book, he even says, like, almost that exact line. He brings them pizza pockets and soda. It's teen heaven up in there. And we've got, I think, another good moment or another good like way to look at it is that I think Alec knows that Brian and Lisa will worry about this, so he doesn't have to. So his laziness is facilitated by these two, uh, like hyper analytical people. And M is right. It's all improv, baby. Because especially with the way his power works in a fight, like he never quite knows what he's gonna need to do. I just feel like it all sort of fits together. You gotta wing it. See what happens. Um, they've already wrapped up the plan. When Vic says Rachel trying to be nice to Taylor. You don't have to come. Yes, that's what that is. Trying to be nice. Um, they've already wrapped up the plan. And Brian reminds them that no plan survives contact with the enemy. And then Taylor mentions that Lung is the only person she's ever fought, and Brian compliments Taylor, and she reframes it so he can understand she's not just being low self-esteem. She actually wants to know about their opposition. So, they decide to run down the list of the wards, and I'll be moving through this section pretty quick because I'll be talking about them in the characters section as well as the powers, knowledge, and world building section. And then, so we've got the leader of the wards is Aegis, or Aegis, depending on how you want to say it. I'll probably slip back and forth between both, so, you know. He's got redundant biology. He has really low, quality flight. He's like, just can kind of hover around slowly. It's kind of funny to me how bad his flight is compared to someone like Victoria, for instance, who has like excellent flight. He has endless reserves of energy and will get back up from anything they can throw at him. Their plan is to just use the dogs to hamper him until they can escape. I don't need to hold back. For once, no, go nuts. Just, don't kill him. Alec, you're there. Ugh, you're the backup there. Keep an eye on Aegis. See if you can't use her power to throw him off. Buy time for a dog to get their jaws on him, and he's probably out of action. Lisa fills in the blanks about powers as we go along, and her power continues to show how incredible it is in this section as well. That was a really rough read, by the way, guys. The way it looks on my script is not elegant. I kind of just had to slap this together because I was even more behind than I usually am. I'm procrastination powered hero. That's my name. Procrastination powered hero. And I came up with that name after waiting way too long to come up with a name, and they said you gotta pick now. And it stuck, just like the next guy we meet, who is Clock Blocker, who was able to name himself by going in front of the media before the branding people could tell the media the name they had picked out, and he just quickly announced he was Clock Blocker. Yeah, so nailing it. He can stop time for things he touches, including people, which means that he can just like get up to you and like tag you, then like cuff your non-moving body, then you're cuffed. They got you already. Damn. And then 2 + 4 × 5 makes a pretty good point that at least Procrastination Power Man is better than Kid Win. Although I would definitely be Procrastination Power Person because it's alliteration. Vic says we hate Kid Win here. I am like a Kid Win apologist. I feel so bad for Kid Win. Greg says shots fired. Oh, Kid Win haters. Anyway, so then Alex says here, long story short, he touches you, you're boned. Then M. I'll tell you in a minute, M, don't worry. Uh, 2 plus 4 times 5 says, I feel bad for him too, but mostly because of his cape name. Like, the thing is, he he was like 13 or 14 and like a kid with like a learning disability who like didn't have good friends who was like, I'll be named Kid Win. And then the marketing people let him do it. That's on them. They're adults. He didn't do like the clock blocker thing where he made it stick by quickly shouting it to the media. So next up we have the last of the ward's sort of heavy hitters from Brian's standpoint, which is Vista, who warps space in various ways. Vista is 12, so if she's at the fight, they'll be fighting a little girl. Just to show how good of people they are to Taylor. Her power is better at working in areas where more with less people, and when more people are in an area, it just sort of slows down how fast she can work on that area. And then she also can't like twist apart biological stuff with her space warping power. Let's see. I have to probably let in and out the dog over time, so you'll hear the door occasionally as the dog comes in and out of the room. Let's see here. Vic says, if they told him no, he would have doubled down. Kidwin hates when people tell him what to do. Are you sure you're not thinking of Taylor? Then Vic says, Tattletale calls the young cape thing a myth, but she's totally wrong. Younger capes do seem way stronger. So it's kind of like, I think they have a higher potential generally because they can connect. So Em, I'll address your point in a second. So they connect to their power earlier, so it's more a part of who they are, and because it's because they had less life experience before having the power, then it consumes them more, kind of. You know what I mean? Like how when we see from like Lisa's perspective, her thought processes are so consumed by her power, and like she still has her personality from before, but like if she had been a little kid when she got her intuition power, it would be like just like maybe mostly the power. I don't know. M says, aren't they also young capes? They're like teenagers, but like legit most capes are between like 13 and probably like 25. Because, well, they mostly trigger in their teen years, and it's really hard to survive for a long time. Let's see here. So M says, oh, that makes sense. And then 2 plus 4 times 5 says, it might be partly because they have more time to adapt to using their powers at a young age, so their brains develop alongside the power. Yeah. Vic says Vista's 12, I think. Yeah, she's 12, but she got her powers. I think she turns 13 like within this next little story chunk because she thinks about it later when we see her from her perspective, and she's had her powers since just before she turned 11, I think. And yeah, pretty young. Pretty young. Um we got next up Kid Win, the much talked about Kid Win. Incredibly good bad name. It's very funny to me. He's especially like with the way people talked on the internet at the time, it feels very much like a 2011 name. Um, he's a tinker who has a flying skateboard, laser pistols, and a high-tech visor. He makes new stuff between each time they see him. So I'll talk about him a little more in a minute, on the other sections post chapters. But yeah, he's a tinker, like how Armsmaster's a tinker, but like, he's like a cool 90s kid who wears sunglasses that were, you know what? He's actually a lot like that kid on that internet poster that from Homestuck that Dave puts the crappy sunglasses on or whatever. He's the 90s kid. Yeah, M's I think M's gonna understand what I mean from that. Um he's got a backwards cap on for sure. Um he is flying through space on a skateboard that may also be a keyboard. Who can know? Um let's see here. So Triumph is mentioned, but they also say that he's old enough now that he has graduated from the wards and become a protectorate member. Because you just become a protectorate member once you're an adult if you're a ward. I mean, you don't technically have to, and they could like say no to you because there's at one point at which Kidwin is like, I don't know if they're gonna want me in the protectorate, and I thought to myself like, are you kidding me? What any parahuman that they can get to not be a supervillain they want. Um, let's see here. So M said, "Oh my God, lol." 2 + 4 × 5 said, "Speaking of 2011, at least he's not named Kid Epic Win." Vic says, he even has a hoverboard. Then said Kid Poggers. M says Kid Pog. I think he would be Kid Pog if he was now. Like that would for sure be his name. That's why I would join the wards. They would accept me even if I sucked. Oh shit. Well, um, I guess that's one way to go. Um, Kid Based and Kid Red Pilled. God damn it. Um, I don't think that the censors would let them get away with Kid Based or Kid Red Pilled. Um, Next up we have Gallant. He wears like technological looking armor, so he looks like some sort of sci-fi knight, but it's just secondhand armor from Kid Win, where Kid Win's just like, here, have this so that people think you're a tinker instead of what you actually do, because his his power is so bad that he I mean, it's not actually that bad, but I like to make fun of it a little bit because he uses secondhand gear. His power is so bad that he has to go to Kid Win for disused Kid Win gear. Um, but yes, his actual power is that he can shoot these light blasts that are filled with emotional like effects as well as like a concussive punch. So he like punches you with emotions, and he can either like kind of drag you in a couple different directions or like send you in a spiral down one emotion. But he has to hit you a bunch of times because they're like not very powerful individually. So he is considered a low level threat on this list. I'd say that in this fight, like this upcoming fight, because Gallant is there. Spoilies, Gallant's in the fight. He's like the weakest person on their team. Like possibly even has detrimental effects to their side. But he also, I mean, just to talk about him a little more, he has a sub power that's kind of cool where he can see emotional auras, which allows him to like that extra sense would allow him to like see where people are in Gru's darkness, for instance. So that's cool. Gallant is Victoria Dallin's boyfriend. They have a public cape relationship. With her, cape persona, Glory Girl, and they're like an on again, off again relationship where they will be really passionate, then break up and fight, and then get back together. You know how you do. Moving on, we've got Shadow Stalker, a hero who was forced to join the wards after one too many bloody excursions around Brockton Bay, where she went a bit too far. She's actively trying to kill Brian and considers his cape self grew to be her primary nemesis. Brian's power messes with Shadowstalker's power, which they speculate is part of why she hates him. No offense, but I hate that. You hate that that Victoria, Dallin, and Gallant are like on again, off again, or which bit? I'm just the delay is so long. It's hard to tell sometimes. Um. And then Taylor voices how unsure she is. So that's the plan then? I said. So many maybes. Brian reminds Taylor that it's their plan, or their collective plan, and that Taylor didn't like to think of it that way because she feels guilty. And then Rachel drops the line Vic mentioned earlier. You don't have to come. It says that she dropped it too casually. Vic says hashtag not my plan. And then Brian basically asks if she's sure she's ready for this. And then Taylor says she's in. Brian gets the burner phones ready, which I think he actually gives to her in the next chapter, which is tomorrow. But he's like, I'll just pre-input all the numbers into it, and then tell Lisa if you need any equipment, because you can get, high quality gear with no serial numbers from our boss. Pretty cool. And then they planned a bank robbery before noon. And Taylor looks over, and yeah, it's 11:30, just like when Em looked over and it was 11:30. Brian, oh no. So, here we are. I basically think this chapter is great. It works really well on a surface level. It's compelling, gets a lot of stuff out there in terms of character info for new characters, laying the groundwork for what's going to happen in the action scene. Kind of gives us a taste without telling us their whole plan. We get tons and tons of great little back and forths between the characters. Em says, that was spooky. I was like, oh shit, I didn't know this was for me. Guess I gotta rob a bank now. Yeah. So I don't know if anybody else has any final thoughts on this chapter, but I thought 3.3 is a great one. It's a hit. We'll start jumping in here a little bit. So 3.4 is actually on the afternoon of the next day from 3.1 and 3.3, or 3.1, 2, and 3, which all happened on Tuesday, and we finally reached Wednesday. These days are really going slow. So we open on the fake out phone conversation where we don't know who it's with, but later we learn it's Armsmaster's secretary. This next one made me sad. Taylor's at home. She hides the cell phone as Danny opens the front door and comes in. She doesn't think her dad would outright say that she couldn't have a cell phone, but given the connection to her mother's death, Taylor feels it's best not to tell him about the cell. Brian gave her 3 burners, all preloaded with numbers of the other Undersiders. Em says, like, I understand that Danny doesn't know the gravity of Taylor's bullying, but when he was like, well, it isn't as bad as before, I was like, damn. Well, I think the idea is that he was trying to ask if it was as bad as what happened in January, which has yet to be revealed to the audience, but is a thing that is bad enough that Taylor doesn't directly see it in her mind's eye. She, like, fully avoids thinking about it. Yeah, it's still not great, the way it sort of comes out. Let's see here. Taylor skipped school again today, justifying that she didn't think she'd be able to focus on classes with the bank robbery happening the next day. She promised herself that she would go face the music at school on Friday for the missed classes, which would put her at 1 week from the story start. She would be back at school on Friday, so it'd be like in 1 week she's fought Lung, joined the Undersiders, robbed a bank, and finally goes back to school. Rachel hadn't been at the loft that day, which Taylor didn't want to question too much. They worked on the plan a little bit to hammer out the final details, then decided on the weapons that Taylor wanted, and she asked for a combat knife and a telescoping police baton. And I like the quote here. The baton, 21 inches long when fully extended, was for more general use, offering more clout than I'd otherwise get with my fists. Lisa had promised I would have them for tomorrow. I just think that's really well presented information, I guess. Snappy. After they finished the remainder of the robbery plan in the morning, they cleared out the storage closet and set up Taylor's room. Taylor doesn't think that much about what to put up in her room. She likes that it's Spartan, and she mentions Lisa talking about how she can personalize the space and doesn't seem to think too much about this either. But I think it's pretty obvious that Lisa's going out of her way to try and keep Taylor there and make her feel like she's actually got a place to stay. And Taylor just doesn't pick up on that. After that, she spends the rest of the day where she would be at school with them before going home. They drop a brief mention of parallel Earths getting media transferred in from Earth Aleph. There's a quick joke about how basically the Star Wars prequels are bad in any universe. Vic says, her room, so cute, makes me wish we spent more time at the loft again. Yeah, I mean, I do. M says, yeah, okay, so the parallel Earth thing. Vic says this only works for older movies, though, right? No, it would actually work for something like Star Wars is almost a perfect example that it would work for, because the split point is 1982, although it wasn't a strong split. So all three of the original Star Wars would have been filmed already. So all of those exist in universe in Worm. And then the prequels would just be different prequels from superhero world. So they'd probably be just totally different settings and concepts, honestly. Because I think George Lucas would be fascinated by I think a lot of creative people would be fascinated by superpowered individuals, frankly. But then okay, so M says that's not alluded to at all before, right? It's not. This is the first time they talk about the alternate universe. Vic says, do you think that the just use different actors for the same movies? No, they don't just use different actors for the same movies. Although there is a subtle joke in Ward about that, where they mention an actor who plays a character in an iconic role, and it's the wrong actor. But it's someone who would make sense as an alternate person to play that. Anyway, moving on. So M says, they're just oh, by the way, you can just buy stuff from a parallel universe. And Vic is right. It's normal for them. Bruh, they were so casual about it. Very casual. I think that he wanted to, the author wanted to drop this in as casually as possible. There are parallel worlds. I'll talk about them a bit more in the powers and world building portion, but not too much. I'm not going to get too much into it. 2 + 4 × 5 says there's a minor detail in Ward that confirms they made 3 movies in the E.T. franchise. Facts. That's true. There's 3 E.T.s. Let's see here. Back at the scene where Danny's coming into the house, Taylor's cooking dinner, thinking about how having one parent you have to learn to cook. Vic says, that's great. We need more E.T. I think there's a lot in this portion about like this little quick mention of Taylor having to learn to cook because of having a single parent. Um, Even if we didn't like sort of know from reading forward, because I'm just going to talk about later stuff right now. Even if we didn't know that there was a period of time where Danny was like so devastated by Annette's death that he like forgot to cook for the household and stuff. So like it's just incredibly sad, and Taylor was like not eating enough. Then there's still like the fact that she feels like the way she puts it in the book, like she either has to have takeout or has to learn to cook because she just doesn't get meals cooked for her most of the time. It's just very sad because I also grew up where I pretty much exclusively cooked my own meals, and it's just like it doesn't feel great. And when you're an adult and you look back on it, you feel neglected. So it's just a little sad. Vic says, and yet Taylor still has an impeccable relationship with food. What a queen. Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think it's good. I think whatever happened there, she's able to like move forward and have a good appetite. Vic's is Taylor's healthiest trait, probably, probably is. She does a lot of unhealthy things. Um, let's see here. Oh yeah, and I was gonna say, metaphorically, the minor trauma of her not having anyone to feed her gave her the minor power of cooking. But that's a bad trade because cooking is something that you can learn from like just anyone. You don't have to be a sad child to learn it. Um, Vic says that's why her plate has no pizza rolls left. She loves pizza rolls. Um, Vic says, "OMG, is that a thinker power?" Yeah, it's just a really, really bad thinker power, and you can learn it. You can learn it normally. Imagine a cooking tinker. I kind of can. I can imagine it in my dome. That should be an OC character because I don't think that there's an actual one in the setting unless you count Bonesaw. Um Taylor tells Danny she's cooking dinner early because she's going out, and Danny goes to get changed. Then he's going to ask her about her new friends over dinner. So Taylor has time to worry about this while she's cooking. Um, Vic says she does occasionally cook people. Um, Taylor's worried about this conversation with her dad, but decides to call all her new teammates by their given names that she gave to her. She correctly assesses that possibly not all of them have told her their actual name. Um, and she thinks about how they usually don't unmask capes who are arrested and wants to ask Lisa about that. She's going to try to keep her lies as close to the truth as possible so that she doesn't mess up and say the wrong thing or like forget her story. Um, Danny's back downstairs in casual clothes and takes over the last part of the cooking. Taylor feels like being at home with her dad used to be safe ground, but with the impending point when Danny learns that she's been skipping so much school, she feels tense at home now too. And the sort of tangle of lies she's beginning to tell about the Undersiders is also weighing on her. Um, I felt like I was on the verge of a terminal breach of trust. Danny asks their names. She lists them in the order you'd expect: Brian, Lisa, Alec, Rachel. She tells him stuff that's close enough to the truth that it won't cause a problem. Like she met them at the library when she spent a lunch going there, stuff like that. Um, Danny says they go to the library at lunch. What are they like? And when I read that line this morning, I thought of the Maurice Moss line from IT Crowd where he goes, "You eat grapes on pizza? What do you like?" Man, classic line. Um, She talks about Brian, and when she gets embarrassed about Brian, she changes the subject to Lisa. Taylor has a lot of trouble navigating this conversation with her dad because of all the like negative emotions around lying and stuff, and she doesn't make any major mistakes or anything, but she's just anxious the whole time and hasn't really learned to deal with this sort of thing yet. Um, Vic liked the Muffs reference, and then Greg says, "Library at lunch sounds like they're giant nerds." Exactly. Danny's like, "Don't you hang out with those nerds." Oh man, like Vic's mom stopping her from hanging out with the theater kids. You don't gotta be in theater. You're gonna be a jock like me. Um, Definitely not criminals. My friends are not criminals. I bought these chicken nuggets for my mouth. Criminals never go to the library. Yeah. Uh, then we were here. Where are we? Yeah, she mentions Lisa is only a year older than her, but she's already graduated high school, which I guess is how some people would refer to getting a GED. I don't know if this was like the way that Taylor talks about this in conversation, if it's like a cultural barrier between Wildbow being Canadian. Like a lot of people in America also don't really understand that a GED is just like not as good as a graduation. Um, and like I have a GED. I didn't graduate high school. But just it's a it's kind of a intentional framing to be like she graduated high school. I would feel like I was lying if I described my situation as having graduated high school, because like it implies having gone to high school also. um Vic says Taylor and her half lies. Yeah, Taylor's actually really good at talking to Danny in a way that won't raise red flags with him, and I think that that's part of what she's doing here by like saying that. Well, that's like part of it is why I couldn't tell if Wildbow has that like disconnect from being Canadian or whether Taylor's being sly on purpose. But I think it kind of works either way. Because you can just pretend like Taylor's being sly and then it's in story reason. Um, Danny asks if they'll all be such good role models for Taylor. She like barely holds in her reaction. Taylor says that Alec always looks bored. Oh wait, sorry. 2 + 4 × 5 says maybe Taylor wanted an additional excuse for if she ever needs to explain that Lisa isn't in school. That's true. M says this was written by a Canadian. Yes, much like our new friends in Canada. Wildbow also lives in that area of Canada. So, ba, ba, ba. Oh yeah, yeah. So, yeah, I thought it was like a really funny question when he asks if they're good role models. But Taylor says that Alec always looks bored, and then thinks about the times when that wasn't true. The only times were when she kicked Rachel a bunch of times, and when he knocked over Brian with his power. So great friend that Alec. And the last one, Rachel. Yeah, Rachel. I don't get along with her. I don't like her. Danny doesn't fill the silence after Taylor says that and lets her go on to talk a bit more about Rachel, likening Rachel to people she deals with at school, which gives Danny the opportunity to ask about the bullies, but he just says, I know, and keeps letting her have the floor. Greg says two of his other stories, Packed and Pale, are also set in Canada. The horror, they're horror novels, and it's not because of the demons. It's mostly because it's set in Canada. Let's see here. Taylor is grateful for him respecting her boundaries, and she opens up to him a bit more about school. She stammers out a description of being surrounded and insulted on Monday, which allows the explanation of why she went downtown to the library. Realizing she's giving him more on this than she has since he learned about the bullying in January. At this point, I think it's kind of like evidence that he wasn't super attentive. Also, that it took him 3 semesters of her going to high school and being like bullied every day to realize that she was being bullied. Like that's not great. Um, Danny asks if they did anything like what happened in January in a way that makes Taylor think that he thought it was at that level of prank each time they like did stuff to her, and that prank was like bad enough to cause her trigger event. So she feels guilty about not letting him know like more about it, not letting him in more and so forth. She tells him that it was a one-time thing that they've done, that they did in January, and that they've pulled smaller pranks since then. Taylor doesn't share any more at this point. She realizes that she actually feels worse after opening up because of the guilty feelings that she had and feeling as though she can't ever have a normal conversation with her dad anymore. Danny asks when she's going out, and she looks at the clock and uses this as an opportunity to bail on the conversation. She lies that she's going to meet Lisa for coffee, just the two of them, and feels bad about the lie. Taylor feels guilty again as Danny hands her a $10 bill to help pay for coffee. She had stashed her gym bag with the costume under the back steps, and she's able to easily grab it on her way out of the house without Danny noticing. She heads east toward the water, then goes south instead of her usual north. This time her destination is the closed down ferry station. We got some good stuff on the history of Brockton Bay right here, where it was a thriving city that has long since seen the end of the good days. We learned that Danny's pet project was to get the ferry going again and to get good transportation for the city and to like smooth out the socioeconomic disparities and so forth. Oh yes, next art. You are correct. It is time for art number dos, and we're gonna take a moment and recognize this art. We can see it coming together. Oh, what's this? Some sort of landscape? Circles? A step? Who could even know what we're looking at yet? A closed down ferry station? Nay, it couldn't be. And Vic said, "Oh God, we have to watch it." This was a big panic one. Def didn't just do this. Um, and then M says, "Oh, little thingy, I love this." God, who's training the? Who's drawing this? Picasso? God. Yeah, Picasso was the drawing god. Um. So yeah, I'm really into these new like uh speed draw things where we get to see. I think it's sick as hell. Um. And it really like I feel like I understand the process better. Like a lot of times I'll see the final art and I'm like, I don't know like how you get from a normal like the shitty art that I do to this. Like I just don't even understand how to do it. But when I'm watching it happen, I'm like, "Oh, now I get it." Ooh. The problem is it just closes the player when it finishes the thing. So, yeah, looks friggin' great for the fact that it was done like hella last minute. Um, M says Victoria loves multicolored overlays. Yeah, yeah. Let's see here. We were here at this part about heading east. So yes, So they're meeting at the ferry station, and Taylor changes in her costume in a disused restroom. Oh, Vic is saying, I should have drawn Armsman unsuccessfully hiding behind a pillar. He like he's way too big with his armor. Yeah, that would have been really funny. But I think as keen-eyed listening viewers, that's right, that's what they are, may have noticed, we have yet to see Armsmaster. Vic has a special relationship with Armsmaster. Um, 2 + 4 × 5 says, or like a shadow of a hallbird behind the wall on the left. Vic says, stop, you'll never see. Okay. I will hold back my my jokes about how you feel about him. Uh so the fairy had, oh, and Vic complimented 2 + 4 × 5's idea. That's pretty nice. The ferry had some of the facility, or the ferry and some of the facilities around it are kept up well so that they look good from the outside. The city doesn't want to pay for the ferry because they actively don't want there to be good transportation between the rich and poor areas of Brockton Bay, wanting to keep it separated so that they like don't. The rich people are like, they'll bring their crime to our rich portion of the city. It's probably uh an old person shaking a cane while saying that, something like that. And wanting to keep the image of the ferry as like looking nice, they always have temporarily out of service and coming soon signs in the buildings around there and on the brochures, so that tourists don't get too suspicious about it. It's just like, oh, what a nice, very briefly closed down ferry. I hope it's I hope it's ready 10 years from now when we come back. And lo and behold, it's not. Moving past the doors to the entrance, Taylor goes upstairs instead and goes to an overlook patio with glass windbreaks and stone tables to eat at, as we can see. And then this is one of the best spots in the city to see the PHQ. It's like a very impressive building atop an oil rig covered in a shimmering aurora borealis glow of its force field. We can sort of see it there, but it's not aurora-ing in this picture. And then we basically get to the last portion with with Taylor just finishing the chapter. As Armsmaster comes out, she says, I need to call in a favor. It's like, dun dun dun! Armsman? Who could have seen this coming? Certainly someone. Vic says, it's so sad because fairies are so cool. Agreed. And then Vic says, sorry, they turned it off for a minute. Stealth mode. But yes, how dramatic for her to say, I need to call in a favor. And for him to show up and all that. Final thoughts on the chapter. I think this is a pretty good chapter. I think the 3.3 is like better, but like that's fine. They're not all gonna be like, there's just little highs and lows, ups and downs. Not that big of a disparity. M says, is she gonna just tell him about the robbery? I don't know. We'll have to see next week, Em. She's blowing her cover so fast. Well, yeah, you're right. I mean, that's, yeah. Vic, were you asking? So for me, I think that the hidden phone call is fine. It's a little bit of it's a little weird, but it's like such a minor thing. And he doesn't really hate it that much. Like he says he doesn't like it because I think he was trying to pull out more stuff for them because they were very overwhelmingly positive. Um, much as I am mostly overwhelmingly positive about this story. Um, and like it just became like such a nitpick of like other people being like, why do you like it here but not here? And it just was a whole thing. And by the end, he was like, wow, this really got overblown. I didn't think it was that big a deal. Um, but yeah, the whole so it's the thing where the phone call was at the beginning of the chapter. She goes, "I'll be there." Yes. I saw a light in the living room window and put my hand over the lower half of my cell phone while I briefly investigated. Damn, my dad was home. I put the phone to my ear. I'm sorry. I've got to run. No, no, look. And then she hangs up. So it's hidden who she's talking to. And, if it hadn't been, like, specifically pointed out, I wouldn't have thought too much about it. Like, it's a little red herring, but it's like, it goes on for such a short amount of time total that, yeah. Um, M says, okay, that's why I don't remember, because I was like, huh? Anyway, yeah. Um, and then, let's see. Yeah, yeah, I think it's fine. 2 plus 4 times 5 says it's a red herring that gets resolved within the very same chapter. Exactly. That's exactly what I mean. Like, it's just not a big deal. I think we could have gone without it, to be honest. Yeah, I think it establishes a good tone though of like her hiding things from her dad right from the first like moment of the chapter. So it serves a function even if it's not a great red herring, it I think works in the chapter. I wouldn't change it basically. I don't know. Meh. Well, so I didn't have a lot written down for themes. I wasn't sure how to phrase like in terms of a one word sentence or anything, but uh in 3.3 it does a really good job of like grounding the setting and making the world feel like a real place. From the local heroes to like the security measures described and like everything ties together really well. So like whatever if it's a theme to have a story that feels well measured and grounded, then that's the theme. And yes, I have the hottest of take that I wouldn't change it. Vic themes: Danny and Taylor's gut-wrenchingly tragic relationship. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, they have a pretty bad relationship, and that is definitely highlighted heavily in 3.4. Um, they're sort of distant, and like it's distant for multiple years on end in terms of like her never opening up to him about like almost 2 full school years worth of bullying and stuff. Vic says made me very sad because like neither of them are really in the wrong in my opinion. I don't think at this point, yeah, either of them are like that they have anything specific that they could do better. It's just that um it's already at such a far state that it's hard to bring it to an okay point again. M says they make me sad too. Yeah, the book can be very emotional. Um uh because it's all about character relationships really. So and character like Taylor's internal journey as a changing character as well. So, yep, there's going to be a lot of sad parts. um so yeah, feel free to mention any other themes anybody thinks. But I was going to move on to the character section and yelling, "No sad, only funny." Sometimes the sad things are also funny in this book. Uh, so Lisa, we see just a reinforcement of everything we know about Lisa. she's kind of reckless, she's brash, she's able to take control of a conversation, she likes to be the smartest one in the room, she is willing to wait and hear people out, especially because from her point of view they're giving her information, so she wants other people to talk. um Comedy equals tragedy plus time. You are right. 2 plus 4 times 5. um so Lisa, wow, great character. One of my all-time faves. She's so iconic. She's so great at this stuff. She's trying to bring Taylor into the fold. She like perfectly knows how to navigate that conversation where she like slowly turns her aim from character to character and like makes it so that Taylor is only ever getting more invested in this by proxy to Brian and stuff, and like leaving it so that there's as little room for failure as possible. And M says, "Love Lisa. Lisa's great." 2 plus 4 times 5 says, "This is a very long story, so therefore it's got to be really funny." Yeah, exactly. Um, so yeah, I think for right now, if we were doing power rankings for characters, because M is our test audience, then Lisa would be at the top of the power rankings. M, you get 100% of the votes right now. It's pretty impressive. Um, and then moving on to Brian a little bit. Oh yeah, I was gonna mention as well about Lisa. I think it's important that little moment where where she tries to get Taylor to personalize her space. So yeah. But Brian, he is, continuing to be like his cautious self. He's really smart. He's good at crimes in the same way that Lisa's good at crimes, but he doesn't like the idea of the bank robbery. Obviously, um, he just he wants to find easy wins because he doesn't see a reason that they should do risky plans. Basically, um, and he wants them to be as well prepared as possible. As we can see in the like character discussion section when he's talking about the wards, as well as like the previous chapter to these two 3.2, where they were training in the like sparring in the loft. Like he just wants to do everything to be ready. Vic says, cute character moments. Alec asking Taylor what her thoughts are with no ulterior motive. Rachel calling Alec runt. Taylor and Brian falling in love with each other via their shared cautiousness. When he doesn't want to rob a bank. Hard eyes. Yes. M says, I thought runt was an insult. It was an insult, but also Alec doesn't care. Vic says, when she wants to rob a bank without killing anyone. Also hard eyes. Yeah, they're totally in love with each other at this point already from this little moment. Um, it's cute coming from Rachel and the fact that Alec doesn't care. Yep, in both directions. M says they are literally in love. It does kind of feel like that in like some of these early chapters. Like they're just so on the same page from get go in terms of like the robbery plans. There's that little moment where it's a little awkward between them where Taylor is being unsure and he's like it's our plan first of all, and are you getting second thoughts? Um but yeah, Brian, another great character. Uh Winner forever. Then we move on to Alec. We can never say anything too bad about Alec because Vic will destroy us. Uh, he's got a lot of little good moments in here. Vic mentioned a few of them. I just generally think some of his stuff, like when they're talking about Clock Blocker, I had pulled that line out. He touches you, you're boned. Like, I don't know. I think he's really well drawn in arcs 3 and 4 especially. Which is not to say he's not later. Just they focus on other things as time passes. And he gets time to shine in 3 and 4. So Rachel, we don't get a lot from Rachel, but she's able to absorb the plan just by hanging around while they plan it. I don't know. We can sort of connect dots back to this when we see them fight at the bank, but she's really effective in the field. Um, so yep. Arms Master, he's there at the fairy thing. He's like, I'm pissed. You don't know why I'm pissed yet, but I'm pissed. Yeah, Taylor doesn't really mention if Rachel is contributing to the plan. She doesn't mention that she contributes to it, but she's listening in because she says stuff when things that involve her get mentioned. Yeah, I think she's mostly just listening because she's like Alec, where she intends to follow the general outline of the plan, then just improvise from there. Let's see, we want to do yes. So next is I don't really have a lot to say about Arms Master, except that Taylor's meeting him. Shock. Aegis, he is the team leader of the wards. We only really know about his power and that Brian said that he's not an idiot. Clock blocker. We don't know that much about him yet, but I did spoil the fact that he picked his own name, etc. He's a real jokester prankster, some would say. When you say his power is so cool, are we talking Aegis? I'm going to talk about their powers in a minuto. Yes, I do wish we got to see more of Aegis' power, though. I agree. The zombie boy. Some people refer to him that way. I always think of him kind of differently than that. Like I don't have like a word for it, but like I know what to explain it. But my brain like has a different relationship to Aegis's power than like what I would think of a zombie. Um, he is not actually a zombie, and he's definitely not an ageist. Um, Zombies fly now? They fly now. Um, Let me think. So he's like because he's not like rotting. He heals back to full essentially. Just like you can put him back together. Like it's mentioned in the chapter that he got an arm torn off and then they just put it back on him later, which I personally find very funny. I think that'd be a great power to have just for like if you had to have a power and live your normal like most of your normal life, what would be a beneficial real life superpower? Aegis's power would be really good because it's like mostly defensive. It mostly doesn't show off. But if you need to, it has like tons and tons of utility for like regular everyday application. Um, let's see here. Just put it back on. Yep. Mr. Potato Head, the power. It's such a good power. Yeah. Anyway, moving on. I'm talking about them as personalities right now. Uh, like their traits that aren't just their powers. So we've got Triumph. We only know that he recently graduated from the wards of the Protectorate. Gallant, dating Glory Girl, who we of course know is Victoria Dallin, who we met in her chapter. Victoria, we have now met her boyfriend, very, very loosely. He's some sort of techno knight. Um, Vista. Vista is a little girl. And yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of funny that we're gonna see someone punch a little girl later. Um, I don't mean to be too mean, but there's something comedic there. Um, Shadow Stalker. She thinks Gru is her nemesis and is actually trying to kill him. Vigilante. Before she was a ward, and she's a ward as punishment and probation. She's supposed to use tranquilizer ammo with her crossbow, but keeps real ammo as well to secretly do things like shoot at Gru. Then we get to Fine and Demon Child. She's not a demon. She's a real normie. And then Em says, Victoria, we hate Shadow Stalker here. Yeah, we kind of do. So now we're getting to the powers, knowledge, and world building. So we'll go through. We heard mention of the Manton effect. We will hear this numerous times throughout. It's an effect that essentially most powers can only operate either on biological things or non-biological things. For instance, Taylor, Rachel, and Alec, their powers only work on biological things. And then like people who do like force fields or lasers or like vistas, like space warping, typically can't use those things when there's a like human body in the way. Vista can't just twist a person into a blood pretzel. But some people are not limited in the same way by the Manton effect. Like, specifically, Alec calls out Narwhal, who is an internationally famous cape who can create force fields inside of people. So she can break those, and then there was a line. Oh yeah, here it is. Tattletale's line is, why these restrictions exist is a question nearly as big as where we got our powers from in the first place. The capes that can get around the Manton effect are among the strongest of us. Narwhal is an amazing name. I'm gonna tell you a little bit about Narwhal. Oh, Vic already did. Vic said, and she's a giant hot lady. She is a giant hot lady. She's actually not like that big. She's kind of tall, but then like most of her height comes from the fact that she makes a like horn out of force fields. She doesn't wear a costume per se. She's naked, but she covers herself like she entirely bodysuits herself in like force fields. I think she's 7 foot with the horn, dude. I don't think that she's actually 7 foot. I think it's like she's like a 6 foot tall lady with a 1 foot tall horn. Nuh-uh. What? Okay, we can look into this later. Maybe you know what? We're gonna. All right, these are some bold claims. We're going Parahumans Wiki right now. You just care that she's tall. Yeah, she's tall as hell. If you want to date a tall older girl, she's a tall older girl, Em. All right, I'm wrong. Everybody's right. Narwhal's a 7 foot tall woman with a 3 foot long horn. Everybody else is right. Hell yeah, I need me a tall older woman that can run me through. Thank you, Vic. Or thank you, Em, for that. But also, yes, you do win, Victoria. Look, I'm here for a 7 foot tall woman. I was misimagining that the 7 feet was the height with the thing, and now I'm like, oh my god, this is a super tall person. Wow, I'm trying to imagine that. Like, again, I have not met a 6'8" person. To imagine a 7 foot tall woman is just like kind of shocking. 3 foot horn is so big too. Yeah. Um. Jeez. Now I'm imagining this scene that she's in, and imagining it with her standing like a legit 4 feet taller than everybody else there. And it's like weirding me out. I'm like reframing the whole thing in my mind. Wow. Um or at least at the horn. Anyway, moving on from all that. As I said earlier, I'll talk about the Earth Aleph stuff. Yeah, there's parallel Earths with different split points from our like real life reality, and they're named after the letters in the Hebrew alphabet. The main setting of the story is Earth Bet. Um. Oh, Vic, you don't have to be sorry. I'm glad to learn to be correctly told. Uh Facts on this about Worm, but I'm just sad that I was so wrong. She was an even taller woman, a giant woman. Um, and yeah, so Earth Bet, you know, main setting, still the second one. Um, I think that Professor Haywire found Earth Aleph, named it Aleph, and then realized he hadn't named the one he was in, and named it Bet. And it stuck. In this chapter, or in these two chapters, we got to see Tattletale's power really shine. Incredibly valuable, just like ridiculously useful. It tells them like all the things they needed to do to find a good job to pull during that time period, to like know how to plan it, to know when the best like or not, I keep saying like when the best time to hit the bank is, and like they are going at the best time, but they would be going at the same time no matter what, so it's actually not a factor. Um, and then let's see here. So we'll go through the powers of the wards. Aegis's power is basically biological redundancy, where he keeps like any part of his body can like turn into other parts to function as those things. Like they give a lot of good examples in the book itself, but like I'm just thinking of like any organ could morph to bridge the gap between any other missing organs basically. Like he doesn't really need lungs. He could create a system that would like get oxygen into his blood anyway. Like, and it wouldn't necessarily be through like an obvious method. I bet he could do crazy stuff like how some bugs have no blood. They just have like hollow pores throughout their body so that when they move, oxygen flows through them. Like there are a lot of crickets and grasshoppers like that, where just like the movement of them jumping around is what gives them uh, oxygenated cells, and that's incredible to me. But it just his body just has plans A to Z. Lungs, no kidneys are now lungs. Taylor would also love slash do well with his power. I think Taylor would do well with most powers, although not uncontrolled powers for a lot of them. Like Damsel of Distress's power she'd be bad with, I think. 2 + 4 × 5 says, imagine if your kidney just started transforming into a mini lung. Yeah. Wow. Be some weird stuff. That's some wacky wild stuff. He can essentially like go on in a fight forever. He has no end to his reserves of like adrenaline. He can always operate on adrenaline strength and like pulling muscles, and like his body will double up to increase his strength in like little ways too. Um, Vic says, yeah, but like Taylor wouldn't have the Taylor brain to do well with most powers. You know what I mean? We don't get to see her pretty much at all with her pre-powered brain. Yeah, I don't think that she'd be good, like as good with every power because she wouldn't have like the multitask brain. But I think that her mindset, like the things that would make her good with the Aegis power, would make her good with a lot of powers. Like she would do what they describe him doing, where she stays like up in your shit constantly, so you can't get a break, and that you can't ever have release from her, like just endlessly wailing on you and trying to like hamper your movements from escape. She'd be a pretty good Aegis as Ward. Um. Uh. Let's see here, and she's also like creative as fuck. I think that that's just kind of part of her personality. Clock blocker. His power is that he can touch stuff and stop it in time. It is random how much time in a time window between 30 seconds and 10 minutes. Um, he doesn't know what it's going to be. The thing that he stops is inviolable and unmovable, to the point where like they give the example, if you drive a car into a piece of paper he stopped, the car will split in half before moving the paper at all. And I'm glad you like Clock Blocker, because I feel like Vic doesn't like that name, and thinks it's bad. That's just a feeling I get. 2 plus 4 times 5 says, I know we talked about this already, but Clock Blocker is such a great name. Um, yeah, no. Vic, you like him as a character, but you don't like the name Clock Blocker, and I think everybody else here in this chat, uh, we all like Clock Blocker, the name and the character. So Clock Blocker's power is amazing. You can use it to stop people or whatever, but you can also use it to make barriers. You can just like do tons of stuff with it. Apparently, like he can like make steps out of like pieces of paper or whatever. Like he could make like a ladder that other people couldn't follow out of like, I don't know, anything that he could just hold several of in his hands, because he would stop them, and then like they would be a handhold. He would move up, let go of it, and then when it just lost his power, it would just drop to the ground. No ladder behind him. It's amazing. He would make a really, really good like villain cape in terms of like someone who pulls heists, I think. Yeah. Um we'll talk about these guys more later too. So don't feel like if we missed some little detail that's a problem, because we will be running into all these characters again. Um so Vista. Vista's power, really powerful. She can like bend space, and uh it's kind of hard to describe, but it's like, because I don't know if I'll be conveying it well. It's very easy for me to imagine, but she can like snap together two sides of a street really fast, so she can take like one step and cross a street, or she can like lengthen something perpetually so that you're running at her and you never, well, you'd eventually reach her, but you're like Zeno's paradoxing and only making it like very small amounts of the way. Vista's a real Doctor Strange. Indeed, I agree. She is. People think of her as someone who is good with a team because she's a powerful utility cape, but if she actually gets like crazy and aggro, she can do things like create a pillar of earth, pinch off the bottom, and then just have it like drop on you. So like just create big falling masses of like stone and whatever, which is, kind of kind of troubling. Also, it's very hard to like shoot her with a gun because she does sort of like um, space warping around her to create a safe environment where bullets can't hit her whenever she thinks there's even like the slightest chance of there being that kind of thing. They don't even talk about that until like way late. But M says describing it as Doctor Strange makes it make more sense to me. I was confused, like exactly what exactly she did. Yeah, I would just say don't take it too far with that metaphor. She doesn't like think of it like a like smudging the paint on a painting, then sort of smudging it back. Like uh it doesn't like move and interlock the build. Like I remember the way the shifting space was in Doctor Strange was kind of like non-Euclidean geometry that allowed stuff to sort of fold into itself. Whereas like Vista's kind of smudging space around. I don't know. Um Vic says she can't really create new. She can only manipulate. Yes, yes, that's part of what I was trying to say. That's a really good way to put it, Vic. Is that yeah, stretches and shrink space, and it can be like really complicated. But 2 + 4 × 5 says she can essentially warp space and physics at will, but her power gets weaker if there are people in the way because of the Manton effect. Yep, 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 yep. Kidwin. Moving on to Kidwin. Aside from winning with his good name and being able to tinker up the best cape name in the business, he can also be a 90s kid who flies around on a hoverboard with sunglasses and laser pistols. You know, winning. Uh, Kidwin definitely wins at least once. That's true. He does win at least once. Um, M says, "God, he's so cool." Um, let's see here. Gallant, again, fake Tinker. His only actual power is the emotion blaster power to donk people with emotions, and then the probably more useful than that emotion sensing power, where he can see like an aura around people that allows him to see their emotions. 2 + 4 × 5 correctly states that M must be thinking of Chris Pratt. He's so cool. Imagine if Kidwin was played by Chris Pratt in a Worm adaptation. Yeah, yeah. And imagine if we could just get, whatever Nintendo executive said that he's so cool line to say he's so cool about him being Kidwin. It would all come full circle. Um, yeah. Moving on to Shadow Stalker. Shadow Stalker can turn into like a non-solid state. She's not like a gas though either, because she can like easily slip through solid material. Um, she's like a haze. You can see her in the air, but yeah. Um, that'd be so cringy. Yeah, I mean, it would be so cringy. For Chris Pratt to play any character. Uh, cringy like Kidwin. Um, uh, then we got Shadow Stalker. I really like the detail about her power that her crossbow bolts lose the effect of her power and turn to normal bolts when they leave her like direct proximity. So, for instance, while flying at Gru's leg, they become regular arrows again, or regular bolts. Um, I think I have come to the end of the powers section, unless people want to talk about previous stuff. Um, Oh, I actually do like Kid Win. It's just he kind of sucks sometimes, and that's funny. Yeah, no, I'm in the camp of like I love Kid Win, but he sucks, and so I just have to acknowledge that he sucks and live with that. And well, he's he's someone to root for, I think. Like especially with when you see him in his own chapter. So anyway, um, I'm going to restate the audience participation question so anyone can add their answers. Vic says a classic example of Wildbow being too ironic. Yeah. So let's name this one Kid Win. Um, I'm glad he backed off from stuff where he was being too cute from before the story. When I read some of the pre-story plans, I was like, this was far too on the nose, and I'm glad that it was written out in a draft. Um, but yeah, the question for today was, do you think that what do you think of the plan they came up with in 3.3? Do you think it was a good plan? Do you think they've cooked up a good scheme? And we don't get to learn too much about the plan, I guess, which I had forgotten when I wrote that question, because they kind of gloss over a lot of the details. Vic says the plan seems bad. I would say that I had malformed the question from my own perspective, because I would say that from 3.3, I don't really know the plan. Um, and Vic says the plan seems bad. M says that I think it's a good plan in theory, but I don't know how it will pan out. And see, the thing is, I only know the plan because of it panning out. Like, that's the weird part now that I'm thinking about it. My brain retroactively filled it in when I was asking that question, but it's kind of like a lot of those heist movies where you learn what's happening as you go. Um, Greg says, at least Kidwin is neither the worst tinker or the worst named cape in the city. That's true. There are worse tinkers and multiple worse named capes in this very same city. Actually, there's, depending on how good Squealer is of a tinker, there are maybe two tinkers worse than him. Who's the worst named cape in the city? Mush. Yeah, Skidmark is a worse named cape. Leet is a worse named cape and a worse tinker. I think Squealer, same on both counts. Mush, worst named cape in the city. Um, M says like they were talking about what the place is like and what they'll be doing, but no real plan. Yeah, yeah, they don't. Yeah, I am always going after Mush. I think he's like it's like amazing how bad of a power he has. And name. Uh, but we will learn their plan as it unfolds, and I will write a better question in the future. Uh, but Victoria, or no, Vic here has said there's some sort of question idea for the end of episode for this audience participation. And I will fill the time while we're waiting for that by saying that for anyone who tried to join the Discord previously and found that the link did not work, I realized that it was a limited time link and I have replaced it with a permanent non-expiring link in all the video descriptions as well as the channel description. The idea for next week's question, because we're meeting these great teenage capes, and note the contents of the next chapter, Vic, are sort of the arms master meeting and then the pre-bank robbery van ride. What kind of programs do you think there are to prevent capes? If you've already read the book, how effective do you think these programs are? What are your ideas for cape prevention? Yeah, that's a good question. Let me write that down. So I'm just gonna directly grab that text. Okay. And then prevent conversion therapy, Lamau, says M, but then Vic says, "Oh, haha, I guess we haven't talked about triggers yet. Maybe we can save this for later. Talk to your kids about cape life powers, not even once." I was just thinking about Little Vistas at school, or Little Vista at school. Yeah, and I mean, if parents were worried more about their kids than about being their own shitty selves, I don't think Vista would be a cape. So, um, yeah, that's a good point that hasn't been talked about enough. Uh, if you guys come up with a brainstormed question in the next little moment here, feel free. But I'm gonna read the outro links and stuff here real quick. So wanted to thank Wildbow for writing the story. You can support him, the author of the work being discussed, at patreon.com/wildbow. The full text of the work is available for free at parahumans.wordpress.com, and the fan-made audiobook is available of the entire work at audioworm.rain-online.org. And all these details, as well as the corrected Discord link, are in the description of the channel and the video. Let me think real quick. So, I guess a question based on knowing what the upcoming 2 chapters are is, what do you think of Lisa's description of the Cops and Robbers game? And you're welcome for the stream, M. Yeah, but, yeah. What? And whoop, whoop. All right, but that is where we'll end it. Thank you very much for coming to the stream. And yeah, I will be airing the next stream at the same time as always at 1 o'clock Mountain, noon Pacific next weekend at on Saturday the 16th. I do want to announce I have a guest. It is going to be one of Vic and I's coworkers, Quinn, who has talked in the chat a couple times, and he is going to help me co-host next week. So thanks for watching, and have a nice week. Bye.